And welcome back to another lesson of the Logos and Letters. My name is Liam, and we're going to look at something particularly important and practical about quantity. So, Kyrios de possa tauta mono legatai ta airemena. So he starts off, it's almost like he's waving his hands in the air. Well, not above his head, but like before his face. You know, when people really want to clarify something and slow things down, he's saying, for these aforementioned things that he's already said, well, that's a tautology. For the aforementioned things that have been said, he's speaking about amount alone, right? Possamonna, right? So he's going to draw a distinction here. Prepare yourself for it. Tada alla panta kata sumbebekos, accidents. All right, so accidents, we believe that we've spoken about them a fair bit, unless I'm imagining things, but accidents. Okay, so there are substances and accidents are things that in the vast majority of cases don't persist, although there are inseparable accidents which last for the lifetime of a substance. But even then, they're still an accident because they don't exist on their own. They exist via participation in the reality of a substance. But let's go back to here. He's drawing a line here, and he's hoping that his students pick up on it. He draws a line here. He's only been particularly focused on amounts, quantities, in everything that he's speaking about. All this other stuff that comes with the discussion that exists in our minds are accidents. Okay, so let's have a look at what he means by that. Tadalla pantakata sumbovekos. Alright, istautagar. Apo blepontes kai talla possa legomen. Hoyon polutolukon legatai tui ten epiphanaian polein ainai. So here's our first example. Epiphanaian is a surface, right? Phanaian is a surface. Okay, and we might say that the surface is white. All right, so you look at maybe you're on a sailing ship, okay? You're on the Endurance or the Adventure or the Discovery, okay? One of those ships. You look up at the sails, they've just set up, the sails are brand new, they've just been installed, and they're catching the wind, and they're magnificent, massive pieces of canvas, and they're floating above your head, and you're new to the ship, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and you look up at it, and you know, you might look at that and go, you know, this white thing above my head, and that's all good, but that's where we need to hone in on. Look at that surface. That surface might be white, that sail might be white, but the surface and the whiteness of the sail need to be understood differently. They are two different accidents. All right, so do I actually have... I'm asking you to imagine all this when I could probably just bring up an image of a perfect... Here we are, right? This triangular four sail, right, is up, and it's catching the wind, and it's doing its job. The surface itself and the color itself are two different accidents. One is obviously a quantity. It's a surface. It's a continuous quantity. And the other, the color, all right, is a quality. Okay, it's a quality. So they're two different categories altogether. We need to train our minds to automatically or instinctually or reliably separate these two things. Okay, because when we speak about it, we might say, you know, if we don't really know English, we might say that white thing there catching the wind. And what is that white thing? Well, it's a sail. That's a substance, and it's a obviously got a surface and it's white, but the surface and the white thing and the whiteness of it are separate. Okay, and in one go we've spoken of a substance and two different categories. That's what he's bringing up, and he's going to give more examples here. Praxis, all right, so an action. Right, so very often we might say that it is a long time, right? The action is a very long time. It takes up much time, and that's a fair thing to say. If you're going to say, how long did it take you to sail from Cape Kidnappers to Tasmania, right? And one of the sailors, maybe Captain Cook, says to you, it takes 5 months. It took us 5 months, or it took us 1 month to sail there. Okay, again, the action is its own category. The month is its own category, and each of these things need to be separated and not considered as one thing. Okay, so when we speak of an action, we often say that it took a lot of time. Time is its own category, and here he's starting to point out how we mix up categories as we speak. So, or not mix up, that sounds like you're making a mistake, but we speak of and refer to multiple categories all in one go. Kinesis, pole, right? So the movement, kinesis, the movement, is great, right? So the movement of a man who stretches up and climbs up the rigging can be described as a great movement. Like, it's not a subtle movement, it's a large one, but the language that we're using when we speak of that can sound like we're speaking of quantity or distance or things like this. And it can start to lead the mind to think about quantity and distance when it should just be thinking about the action itself in some circumstances. And let's continue on. And remember what he was saying. He, right here, isn't speaking about any of that stuff. He's not speaking about that. What he's talking about alone right here, what he's trying to make points about alone when it comes to taxin and thesin and diorismon and sunasterke, he's talking about possa, monna, right? He's talking about quantities alone. He doesn't want us to learn or study this material and think that all of the other accidents, the other categories, are being taught too, or being included here too. They just happen to come along with quantities all the time. Separate them. Separate the quantities. Separate the continuous quantity of the sail, right? I keep going back to that. Of the sail from the whiteness of the sail and from the substance of it being a sail. Okay? Even a surface isn't a substance. Okay? So you say the surface of this desk, right? The desk is the actual substance. The surface is an accident of it. It's a quantity, continuous quantity, right? So here it's almost a lesson on distinctions and distinguishing and clarification, honing in our thoughts. Hoionian apodidoi tis pose tis praxis esti. Right, so just as if someone should render an account of how great the action is, right, of a quantity of the action in a way. Toi chronon horai horiai, right? So you might speak about, when it comes to the greatness of an action, you might speak about the time. So, it's considerable action to sail from Cape Kidnappers in the South Island of New Zealand all the way to Tasmania, right? And someone might mention not so much the movement of the limbs or the sail or the rigging and all these other things. They might speak about the time that it took to do the action. But the action and the time are two different things. and the space that are covered and all these other things. They're two different things, right? So he's in this particular point, he's explaining how another category can sort of intrude itself to explain another category, right? To chronoi, right? Time is related to our current topic, chapter 6, quantities, okay? Praxis, right? That's a completely different category in itself. Eneosian, he hutopos apodidus, right? So, kaito lukon posonti apodidos te epiphania horiai. This is sort of what we've already covered, and we might answer if we said like how big is that sail, how big is that white thing there, and we're talking about the surface. We start using the category of, or the accident of its color to respond to that answer of how big it is. So for a different example, let's go to a different picture, and we might say, how big, a child might say, how big is that sail? Okay, and that's a good question, because it's asking how big is the substance, and it's just asking what is the category, like what's the accident of that substance. But if you said how big is that white thing there, and you said, oh, it's as big as that white thing, it's as big as itself, then you can see where things have gone wrong. Where things have gone wrong is trying to use the category of color, category of quality, the accident of color, to explain quantity, right? Quantity, questions about quantity deserve answers regarding quantity, and questions regarding quality deserve answers of that regard quality. And that's the sum and total of this lesson so far. That's what he's trying to drive at here. If you're asking about quantities, answer with quantities. If you're asking about qualities, answer with qualities. If you're asking about action, try to answer with action. Now, if you don't answer in such a way, that's fine. It can still be intelligible and understandable. But if you want absolute precision and specificity, then you're going to want to answer with the same category that was raised in the first place. Right? I'll leave it there. I'll leave the lesson there because it's a denser lesson. But just remembering this part, Kyrios te posa tauta monalegatai ta aireimena. Right? So this chapter is dedicated to posamana, right? Amounts alone. And all the other stuff that comes with amounts are other accidents, spoken of according to other accidents. Okay, so every time we sort of think of 7 days of creation, like that's sort of why I've got this thing up here anyway, because I wanted to get this up, but I accidentally clicked on this instead. If you look here, this is Genesis of the cosmos, of the ordered universe, and you think of the first days, that's Hemramia, right? Let me go here. Hemramia, 1 day. Now, 1 is a quantity. Day is not a quantity, a definite quantity. Day is an accident, right? A different sort of accident. So if you said, no, but 1 day is 24 hours, that's not particularly true, because if you go to a different planet or a moon or some other thing, days take longer or go for longer or go for shorter, okay? The fastest spinning planets have shorter days. The slowest spinning planets have longer days, I believe. And so a day isn't actually just a definite quantity of 24, and even hours is a sort of another definite quantity of 60 minutes, and so on and so forth. And already. That lesson that we just looked at there with in the categories is applying to the Genesis story. Hemra jutra, second, right? Now I could also bring up how some parts have an order with a relation to one another, or positions with relation to one another. But I'm not going to go into that just yet. That can be saved for another day. But what we're just going to highlight is that quantities also have an attachment of something else to it, and a very, very famous one happens to be in the Genesis story. Days are attached to it. And you might ask yourself, since nobody in Hemeramia was on the planet to experience a single day, 24 hours on planet Earth, how could it be said to be a day when one day can be 24 hours or a different quantity? Because one day on Neptune, one day on Jupiter are different lengths of time. So what good is it to say one day when one day can be so many different things? That might be exactly the point that we're trying to get at. The day itself is not so much to be regarded as what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 represents. Okay, and what is that? Taksin, order, right? And sure, it doesn't hold definite numbers don't hold positions, but they might hold positions by reason, a sort of relative importance when considered as a whole. So why did the things that happen on the first day happen first? Why did the things that happen on the Hemradutra, the second day, happen? Now, I'm not going to answer those. I'm not going to try to provide a definite answer for any of that, but I'm just showing you where this logic is leading and what it can apply to. So if it does seem boring and hair splitting, fair enough. But if you're a biblical scholar, or if you're someone else who's big into exegesis and things like that, and critical analysis of text, then this logic is these lessons are made for you. All right, we will pick up where we left off next lesson. Obviously, we're going over this part and also looking at the first few sentences of this next next paragraph. The next chapter will be chapter 7, somewhere down here, chapter 7 here, quality. Okay, so I know I mentioned quality, and that is where we will learn about quality. Is down there in chapter 7 where I just indicated. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Hope it's been interesting in a way, and I hope this explanation of how we use different accidents to explain things like actions and surfaces made sense. If it didn't, that's okay. We've got plenty of other lessons to keep referring to and building on what we've learned. Practice makes perfect. What's that saying? Repetition is the mother of success, or something. So yeah, I'll see you next time.